Thank you for coming tonight. Those of you that are staying for both meetings, you'll probably saw the invitation. We're separating the Zenoff planning process, even though they're conjoined with Gerke from Gerke. So this first presentation will center on kind of the Zenoff process, but there is a little bit of overlap. Just housekeeping items, if you do need a restroom, the restrooms are located out the back and to the left before the concession stand. Feel free, obviously, to excuse yourself. If you've not silenced your cell phones, I'll also ask you to do that. Depending upon how long this meeting goes, we might have people starting to come in and out as they're going for the second meeting. And obviously, we do know that there's going to be people that might only be able to stay for segments. So the way the agenda is set up tonight is we're going to run through I'm going to talk through the planning process, kind of how we got here and where we're headed. And then I'm going to actually talk about the physical drawings. I'm going to ask if you have questions during those first two pieces that you either write them down or keep them in your mental notes, and then we'll actually open it up for questions. We can go back to slides, and the reason for that is just if people do have to go, we want to get the public information piece of this out first, and then we'll take questions and answers as we go from that point. We'll close today talking about the surveys, so we are trying to get as much public feedback as we can comprehensively in writing via our surveys, and then we'll also talk about the public discussions and kind of the discussion making that's going to go on with our park commission. So, to get started, who am I and what's my role in this process? My name is Dan Kramer. I'm the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry for the City of Stevens Point. I began with the city in 2019. I've served 2 communities prior to that. I've been in the field for about 13 years. So my role in this is really to be the primary planning facilitator within the city system. So I'm really a conduit between the user groups and the community feedback and getting that information to the Park Commission as well as to the Common Council. While I certainly will make recommendations and I get a lot of feedback that comes through my office, I actually don't have a vote in anything that goes into our plans at the end of it. That all goes through our elected bodies. So following these different meetings that we're having, as well as all the surveys, ultimately the Park Commission, the 11 members on the Park Commission is who will take that information that we will package up. They'll review it, they'll take public comment as well at those meetings as we have them, and then they will eventually direct the redraft or the changes to the drawing, and then they'll ultimately also be the ones that will make the recommendation of approval sometime later this year. They're actually not the final step though. They are a recommendation board to the Common Council, and that is the actual final step for approval. So these processes typically take 2 months once they get to some of the voting pieces. Park Commission meets the first Wednesday of the month. The council meets the 3rd week. So when there's revisions, a lot of times it takes another month to get back to Park Commission. Then it honestly goes and gets forwarded on to the Common Council. So we'll talk about timeline as we get into it a little further, but please know that there's multiple steps that do go into this as we start working through it. The final, one more thing I want to mention is what is the master planning process? You'll know if you follow along in government processes, we do a lot of plans. So we're going to talk about the core plan, we're going to talk about a master plan. That's not design documents, that's not bid contracts. There's a lot of steps when we go and talk about different projects, especially when we're in the idea phase. Master planning is really step 2 in multiple steps. So we did a corp plan, which I'm going to talk about later. We take the corp and that starts to drive the bus to get us to a master planning phase. The master plan is still, corp is 50,000, 100,000 square foot. We get a little closer with a master plan about what might fit and what does it a little bit look like. But until we get into actual design documents, master planning is really just an exercise we do. We try to do it for all of our parks over time so that when an interest group comes forward or a certain group is trying to improve something, we don't let them just build something reactionarily and then it impacts other things. So we do a lot of planning. This one is much larger magnitude than normal. The most recent you probably remember is Sarimer Park. We did a bunch of planning for that exercise in a neighborhood setting. Also the Plover River Crossing Trail, which is going to be coming to fruition here over the next year. That was another planning exercise that we worked through. Again, not to the scale as this one. There's been some questions that have come up about who's also working on this project alongside my department and myself. We do have a co-chair that is a volunteer. So Tim Sherrill is 100% a volunteer in this project. He personally is the co-CEO of Team Sherrill Companies. Tim helped my department in the city lead 2 big multi-million-dollar fundraising efforts for Gerke Park in 2007 and 2022. Tim is a lifelong resident in Stevens Point. His wife and him, Sarah, raised 6 children in the community who all attended Stevens Point schools. They were all multi-sport athletes. He has coached in almost all the organizations that are kind of part of these 2 planning processes and that interacted within the park system. He's a huge advocate for the Parks Department, for family, quality of life, and the things that we do within our park system and the city. So ultimately, Tim's company, also I wanted to mention, was a lead donor in 3 large projects the city park system did. In 2007 for the Gerke Stadium upgrades, in 2019 for the Zenoff Turf project, and in 2022 for the Gerke Stadium. So Tim's been alongside for almost all the meetings with the planning side, helping shape some of the drawings and giving his feedback. He also knows a lot of the partners and organizations, so sometimes when I don't have a contact personally with an organization, he's been able to be a conduit based on some of the connections that he's had. Tim is here tonight, if you don't mind just standing up for a second for those that maybe don't know you. If there's things that come up that I miss in the presentation, Tim might also mention it here, or he might raise his hand and just add things if I don't mention it. So first and foremost, what are the steps? How do we get here? So in 2022, I mentioned this CORP document, and that's just an acronym for the Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. So that planning document happens every 5 years in the city of Stevens Point. We have 5 or 6 of them on the files and through the books, through the history of our department. Why we do it is, again, this 50,000 square foot or 100,000 square foot idea of what have we been doing in the park system, what are some of the accomplishments, and where are we kind of headed over the next 5 years. We also ask the community to do surveys and come to meetings during that process to kind of tell us what they're looking for. I can tell you, and we'll mention it later, the Aquatic Center and pickleball were really the 2 leading things that were in the CORP document back in 2022, and we're receiving a lot of comments about pickleball in the surveys that we're collecting right now as well. In 2023, we adopted that document. So that document is now on the books, and what it really serves for is it makes things that are in the document grant eligible with the state of Wisconsin. So if we apply for any Knowles Nelson stewardship funds or we apply for state of Wisconsin funding, if you don't have a CORP document up to date and adopted, they're not eligible. So that's a really big piece of why we do it, but it also is kind of a snapshot. When we look back in history sometimes, if we want to know what things were happening, even small things like who were the park commission members, all of those things are within that document. The book is lengthy, though, I will tell you. I'll show you a page here in a second, but it's a couple hundred pages. If you ever need some light reading, you certainly can load it. But usually what happens with that document is when things come up, people will reference back to the specifics of it. During that time, though, when we were looking through the Comprehensive Outdoor Rec Plan, a number of parks were mentioned for master plans, including Zenoff Park and also Gerke Park, which is obviously why you're here tonight. But there's some connections between Gerke and Zenoff because our Point Fast Pitch organization is housed here in Gerke, but they certainly play over at Zenoff Park as well. And there's been a long-standing interest in can Zenoff be further developed eventually to allow more access to more organizations, not just Point Fast Pitch, but Point Youth Baseball, our high school softball programs, even our collegiate softball programs. So we've always been kind of at a stopping point of what would that even look like. So the master planning exercise that was called out, we were doing them both, was to say we should do a master plan for Zenoff and what could be in the future. This is page 126 from the plan. You can review the whole plan on the city website if you want to, but if you look at the bottom of the plan, the master plan was the first thing that got listed there as future steps as we looked at Zenoff Park. Again, it doesn't mean that things are funded, it doesn't mean things are happening now, but it allows us to say, hey, this is the way we're kind of working towards it in the future. As we went from that process, the CORP getting adopted, there was a bunch of moving pieces in Gerke Park. I mentioned how they kind of came together. But we started and we actually enlisted the help of Rettler Corporation in June of 2024. That's the first contract that got issued for this planning exercise. And we enlisted Rettler Corporation, who helped us with the CORP. We actually have Ross here tonight in the front of the room as well. Rettler Corporation is a landscape architect in the city. They work across the whole state, but they do a lot of our planning exercises where they actually draw up what we're trying to incorporate, make sure things that might fit or if they won't fit within the documents. So from that standpoint, we started saying, how are we going to work through this planning exercise? And we started by saying we were going to talk to some of the largest park users in that system, right? Talking to SPSA first at Zenoff, because they've been running the complex primarily for the last 35 years. We talked briefly with the youth baseball and softball groups, but we certainly engaged the high school program and the collegiate program because they did not pledge to the turf upgrades in 2019. The other 3 organizations did. So getting a little bit more in the weeds, those that pledged in 2019 get to use Zenoff without a cost. The other groups that didn't have to pay fees. So sometimes we run into a situation where we'd like to put those organizations there more, but because they didn't pledge, they don't have priority scheduling, and we're in a situation now where we're 6 years beyond that project, and conversations are being renewed about how can we maybe become a part of it long term. And we've developed a pretty strong relationship with both the school district and the college, and we're trying to incorporate more of these collaborations so that as our facilities age and we look at upgrades, maybe we can recruit some more of those users and use the fields more than what they are today. So we had those conversations, and then we knew, because we surround the Moose Lodge, that if we were going to do something in the future, we needed to talk with them. First and foremost, we didn't want to surprise them that if we were going to be doing something with an upgrade that didn't touch their property or it did touch their property, we just wanted to know what they were kind of thinking or what they were doing. So we did talk with the Moose Lodge a couple times as well. They attended one of our park commission meetings and kind of voiced their position on the process at that time. Following the first meeting, we've been lumping the Zenoff meetings in with a lot of the meetings we're having overall with Gerke and Zenoff. We're a little over 43 meetings right now. The list of people I've had attending them is around 125. If you take all those individuals and the other conversations that are happening, we know this project is well over 1,000 hours between the two exercises. The second review, when we took the drawing and kind of the first preliminary conversations, we asked the athletic directors from the college and the high school to send some sizes of what fields might look like. We developed what we're going to show you here later for Zenoff, and we took that to the Park Commission on February 12th. The reason for it at February 12th was to ask the Park Commission if they were okay with the status of the drawings to move into the community feedback side, which is where we are now. So we've got surveys open, as you've probably all seen, and obviously we wanted to have this meeting and make sure people were aware they could come to public input meetings and come to our Park Commission meetings to give more feedback. And the goal of that is to be able to give the 11 members of the Park Commission both the community side on this project as well as the user side, and then package up what a plan will look like here to finalize. Looking forward, we're in March. We believe in May, as early as May or as late as June, the survey data and the feedback will come to Park Commission for that public discussion. We anticipate it could be June, July, August. It could be later, depending upon how many revisions happen, that we'll be moving to adoption. So November 6th, this was the first drawing that came to the Park Commission. And what this was based on some preliminary conversations with the Moose about, we thought maybe at that time we could work something out with a shared use parking lot that could serve both facilities, and if there could be some sort of land swap or a land sale that could be done so the city could construct another field. At that time, we were kind of heading towards, we thought maybe something could happen, and the Park Commission said that they were comfortable with the drawing proceeding on not our property, basically putting something together since we've been talking with the Moose and seeing what the opportunities would hold. From there, we were not able to get to basically a letter of understanding with the Moose thus far. Still have an open dialogue, but we're just not at a point where we have an agreement status. So we also want to have plans adopted that are possible, right? That if we never acquire property, that we don't just say Zenoff's going to age and we do nothing. So when we got to February, we have a secondary drawing, and we'll get into the specifics of it, of where a field could be improved on our current grounds that might be allowed to have the high school, the college, and some more access for youth as well, if there's some more flexibility and the infrastructure is more improved. Additionally, we'll talk about some of the things that the complex needs as a whole, even if we don't do any other fields. These preliminary drafts were authorized by the Park Commission to collect feedback, and obviously that's how we got here this evening. What's in the park now? So some people, you've probably been to the park, but you might not have looked at an aerial image to see what we actually have. There are three 300-foot fences, which means from home plate to the outfield fence is 300 feet. They're sized for adult softball. That's really what they're made for. We have sleeves in the outfield fences that allow youth field fences to be put in so that the home run distance is shorter for youth athletics. I will tell you that if you look at it from an aesthetic standpoint, that's not the cleanest look. The new complexes that do get built, when fields are upgraded, a lot of times metal fences go in that can be moved with wheels, and it's just, as you know, athletics has changed in terms of competition through the years. We're certainly focused on recreation, but these competition, when you get into high school and collegiate, the bar gets raised. So essentially, these fields really work great. And in 2019, we put turf infields in with the help of SPSA, in a fundraising effort, and that allowed greater access for the youth because you could move the base dimensions as well as home plate, and you could do that without having to drag the field and change things over. So really in 2019, the usage of the youth has increased significantly. We had been seeing a decline in some of the adult softball teams, so there's been more access out there as well. So those two things have kind of gone together. In addition to the fields themselves, you can see that we have a pretty large parking lot that's at Zenoff Park that leads into the complex where we have an open air shelter. There's a bathroom, restroom facility with concession stand. There's an office building in the back corner that's kind of where SPSA has their headquarters. And then obviously we have all the infrastructure for the fields between irrigation, the backstops, the bleachers, as well as the score booths. There's a batting cage down here in the bottom, and you can see kind of the outline of where the Moose Lodge property falls in between it. Ours is about 16.5 acres. The Moose Lodge is a little over 2 acres. The city owns significant acreage around this complex, but it's wetland. That's why there's not a lot of talk about expanding south, is there's a lot of DNR requirements that don't allow us just to fill those wetlands in. A lot of the fields, when they were constructed, if they would have been constructed today, it probably would have been a lot different process than what they allowed all those years ago. Okay, so current draft A. So essentially, I've mentioned some of this, but to do draft A or build a field of this magnitude, it would require acquisition of about 1 acre or a little more of the Moose Lodge. That's ultimately their choice. Might never happen. That really comes down to if a deal could be worked out or if it'd be advantageous for both parties. Additionally, the field lends itself to being able to recruit long-term partners here that we don't currently have contractual arrangements with. And that specifically really lends itself to if the school districts were ever interested, both public and private, as well as the college. That's kind of the idea. If we recruit them, the other added benefit is their seasons don't overlap all summer, which is what lends itself for youth to pick a fourth field up, as well as other opportunities for even adults for practices. So again, if anyone's gone to Plover, I think I can mention it, right? You've seen what a complex looks like when you have varying size fields and you have them in one location, is you can bring a lot of youth and different age groups down to the complex, and that's really what's been being asked for in our community. If you look at the 4 fields and potentially a 5th someday in and around this area, I think that's what our community has been telling us they'd like to see in this location if it can be anywhere else, but it doesn't mean it has to just be in this location either. And the 4 field enhances tournament recruitments by a massive margin. If you can have practices and games going on and then have tournaments on the weekends, we could take our current tournament load and probably double it if you have more fields. That certainly sells hotel rooms and gives an opportunity for heads and beds and room tax, which is certainly something that helps fund these type of improvements as well. Other things, even if this was the concept that ends up happening someday, the current plaza has gravel between the ball fields. That's not as common if you go to ball field complexes today. A lot of times you're going to see concrete or asphalt. We have wood poles for all of our lights as well, and those lights have been there for many, many years. If you've been by Buchholz, you'll see we just upgraded to an LED lighting system there. That's also on the docket for Zenoff. We'd like to see the lights get upgraded to today's standards, just because as those poles age, eventually we're going to start to see more rot, and we'll start to have problems where we'll have to actually remove poles. So the new standards are putting in metal poles. A lot of the buildings that were constructed out there were state-of-the-art when they went in, but now they're just crumbling. I think I got a call from an athletic director last year where they couldn't close the door just because the frames and things are rotting in certain parts of it. And that's just due to ongoing maintenance items where we've been patching things but not been able to have the funding or the usage numbers from the city side to keep putting the money into the actual complex. So this was what the first concept was. It's what you'll see in the survey as draft A. And so far, again, the preliminary surveys that we've got, they're not tallied, but there's been a lot of support of saying, hey, if more fields can be constructed here or another field, that would be wonderful. If land isn't acquired, ultimately the city is saying, well, what would still position the complex to be able to maybe host some more competition play? You know, what would allow us to be able to see if a high school or collegiate game could be here in a more pristine diamond is the best way I can phrase it. What this draft is showing is that one field would likely need to be, if we wanted to recruit and have this used by more of our school districts, turfed with a permanent movable fence at that youth or high school level that can be moved in and out versus kind of the sagging plastic fences that we put in now. In addition to that, you can still see the hardscape, the resurfaced parking lot. If you read the legend, it'll talk about the lighting and all the other upgrades I went through. This would make it better than it is today, but it still would not solve the issue of really bursting at the seams and the fact that if we wanted to have more youth softball or your youth baseball, have high school and collegiate athletics as well as the adults play here, it's a field numbers issue more than it is a quality of fields issue that we have. The other thing about this is it would put significant money into a parking lot. And if someday something did change with an adjoining neighbor, you know, full discretion, it would really be awful for the city to spend that kind of dollars if we ever were then going to try to rip that back out. So if this ends up being the path forward many years from now or whenever that happens, you know, there would be kind of a commitment to saying then that parking lot's probably going to stay in that kind of arrangement in the future. So basically, extra items that we're working through in this planning process. We hope that we can work with the Moose Lodge. Again, been very pleasant conversations, but ultimately it comes down to if it makes sense for their organization, and if something comes to terms, it also has to make sense for the city elected officials that would make those decisions. And those things, you know, they take some time, and ultimately it does come back to our Park Commission and our Common Council, as well as the dollars and cents side of it, and if it would work for Moose Lodge. And that can take years, and sometimes it doesn't ever happen, right? So that's really a big question for Plan A. Thus far, we've received quite a bit of positive feedback saying if we can construct additional fields, that it seems to be pretty unilaterally supported, that more athletics out there, being close to SPASH, being close to UWSP, there's a bunch of extra overflow parking if we could work out with the high school, if there was ever tournaments about being able to potentially bus people up to the complex. There's some synergies that might work if long-term arrangements can work out. And really, we're looking at having two concepts that are both potentially constructible if the combination is right. With that, before I go to the question answer session for this part of the plan, I just want to remind everybody it's www.stevenspoint.com/surveys. You'll see both the Gerke and the Zenoff surveys at that link. And we're encouraging you, your friends, your neighbors, your cousins, resident, non-resident, doesn't matter, fill it out. That data will be compiled and we will have the results for the Park Commission and the public to view in both a resident setting and a non-resident setting, as well as the comments you put into the survey. Additionally, you can stay engaged much further than this. You can come to the Park Commission meetings. We anticipate that May 7th or June 4th will be that meeting where they're going to discuss the actual results of the surveys. Additionally, if you can't make the meeting, you can watch it from your house online. It's live streamed on the city website, and then it's recorded. So it's also available on YouTube following the meeting. And again, you can continue to watch it. There's likely going to be a discussion, and then there'll be a follow-up meeting most likely with any sort of revisions before they'd actually get to an adoption stage. So again, please share that link with anyone that you can. For the Zenoff section, actually, that is the end of my formal presentation. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions on the Zenoff Park component that anyone has.
Is there a microphone or anything?
Nope, just where we're at. We're good.
Right. I have a few questions.
Yeah.
Has the committee considered placing the dome here?
They have not.
Is that something that you would or should consider? The non-concurrent use makes sense, right? This isn't used in the winter. The dome could be, but you really would have to increase the parking, I think, and get something going by the hoops. But is it something you look at?
I think we could. There's some wetland impacts in this location, and the way the fields lay out on the existing drawing, I'm not sure about configuration, but it's certainly, if there's desire of doing that, could we look at it? I'd have to talk to Ross about what the shape of that structure looks like and how it would impact it. And then certainly we'd have to talk to groups like SPSA and the other groups about saying, would they want to be undercover?
Yeah, to me it kind of makes sense, again, for non-concurrent. You use it all winter for the exact reasons you have it here at Gerke, right? When I did a cut and paste, it would fit essentially where the parking is now.
Okay.
And then where the existing little buildings and shelters are could be a nicer facility that serves everything, of course. But really the parking would have to be in the Moose property and you have to work all of that out.
Did you happen to keep the cut and paste drawing that you could share with us? Okay, yeah, send it over.
Go to, here it doesn't show the wetlands, but I think on the next slide it shows the proximity to the wetland. Yeah, is that orange, is that the wetland?
Yeah, correct. And we have a delineated map of it as well. So if you get outside the outfield fences on the first two diamonds too, they're not very far outside the actual fence itself.
Okay, go to the next slide again, please. Or, sorry, back. What I was going to ask is, what are the possibilities of expanding to the south? Moving the sculpture park, rearranging some things, the drainage ditch, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely a higher bar to do that. But yeah, it's really not really heavily used space that the city owns. So one field in there even would help a lot.
Yeah, my understanding is it would take wetland mitigation credits, or we'd have to create other wetland in other locations. So, but full honesty, that has not been explored for this site.
Okay. There was a question online about public input about using the field that's to the south of here on whatever road that is by the old convent. I don't know if any of that ties together here, or could be a possible
By the old convent?
connection. Yeah, to the west of there,
Maria.
where Union comes up.
So, separate department, but I can tell you that my understanding of the Maria site is there's two processes going on. My understanding is that the Community Development Department is doing a capstone project with students, which is a worthwhile exercise, but it's kind of student involvement, and that was what the release was to the public about what could go there. And my understanding is that there's also review internally about housing. And I think those are the two elements in those locations. But I don't speak for community development. They can answer that for sure. But I believe the exercise that was online that talked about could a dome or things of that nature go there is a student-run organization kind of planning. And that they kind of run concurrently. And I think typically my understanding is the city kind of takes the good of some of those thoughts and ideas, but then the planning office actually goes through infill and density and housing and things like that.
Sure. I was just curious how if that property connects in the back here somehow. It's a ways south, I don't know if it does.
The Zenoff?
Yeah, through the woods down to that property on Maria. The schools. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. That's a whole block south.
The Century owns property to the southeast corner of this. I don't know what the green circle cuts through that.
Yeah, so the green circle goes through. That's not all on
No, the sculpture park, which don't quote me, I think it's 26 acres, is city-owned, and then the green circle actually goes across Century property.
Okay.
Yep. And most of the green circle, the sculpture park, I can share with you. They're looking at some landscape architecture for pollinator habitat and upgrades to the sculpture park. A lot of it, most of it is wetland. There's actually a pond in the middle of that property, so yeah, the wetland boundaries continue.
Well, with the water there, you can kind of see it's pretty much there. Okay, that's about all. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yep. So I don't want to get too much into Gerke, but we're still only adding one field, but losing two. So we're losing a field, right? Because there's two over here with the dome, and we're only adding one at Zenoff. So we're still essentially losing one ballpark, correct?
So your question is if we're losing a field in Gerke and gaining a field in Zenoff?
Losing two, gaining one.
Okay. So to address the question specifically, the bubble in the dome in Gerke is a big component of the next meeting, okay? If it goes or it doesn't go, the turf inside that facility, or turf even if the facility wasn't there, is sized to have 2 youth diamonds with fences, or to have 1 high school or college diamond, and the second one couldn't be active. The fences could be removed, and you'd have a large field that could be used for football, lacrosse, soccer, etc. Here, you're correct. If we could work a land deal out, there'd be 1 field addition. With more land, more could be explored, but we don't know if there's enough land opportunity for 1. So really a big piece of that lies in your organization.
Has the city thought about just buying moves out all together?
I don't know if it's for sale.
Fair enough.
I guess I should ask, do you know if it's for sale?
Everything's for sale.
It's not for sale.
What I can tell you, because this is open record, we have not been told what the Moose Lodge would like to do.
I was just wondering if it was this board. And when you back up, great presentation as usual, man. Well done. And that'll come down the road. Now, what about, putting another field in is going to draw really big baseball tournaments, right? Is there enough lodging for a tournament Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Is there, because we've got, a couple of hotels, by Culver's and all that. Is there enough lodging to accommodate that many people? Because, that could potentially be, a ton of people. Where are they going to stay? Do we have a guesstimate on what a 4-diamond ballpark type of tournament would bring in versus the amount of lodging at the hotels that we currently have?
Yeah, great question. So I can't speak to the exact number of rooms in the city, but I can tell you that I sit on the CVB board as an advisory role. I also work with the Tourism Commission in the city, and they're continually looking at heads and beds. So our groups, like SPSA, for example, goes to the Tourism Commission every year. They've been really supportive of awarding grant dollars to them because they say they see a direct benefit of heads and beds for them. Now, we do have a big complex, not we, but Plover does. And to my understanding, I've not been told, and not that they would tell me, but I've not heard that they can't house the folks that in the hotels when they're going to that complex. The short answer is, and I can't speak for the hotel industry, but every hotel wants to be booked, but they don't want too many hotels where they're not booked full, okay? So it's always a give and take. My understanding of that industry of when they're bursting for rooms, they'd love to see another hotel. But then the other weekends and things that aren't as popular, they'd love to see their own hotel full. So it is a balancing act. Sometimes, though, my understanding of the private industry is if we drove people to our community to play here and we were short hotels, it lends itself to the hotel industry to react to the market. So I'm not an economist. I can't get into exactly how that works. But what we are looking at, we're looking at demand of play. Our youth groups are saying we demand more play. That's our role. Then we would have to turn to the CVB as well as the hotel industry saying, hey, these people are struggling to stay here. To my knowledge right now, and I think Fast Pitch would be the best or the largest tournament. Do you guys have any hotel issues on your weekend?
No, we host typically 50 teams for a 3-day event. We use every field in the city. And we've never heard of a problem with hotels or anything like that.
What about amount of fields?
Yeah, we use 8 right now for our tournament, and it works. We've We could go bigger, but we're pretty much maxed out.
Because essentially we're losing one.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And then here, one more. On a previous slide on the bottom, it had two different concepts. What's option B? What is the other?
Here.
No, keep going back. A talking point. Oh, there.
So the two concepts would be concept A, concept B. So a new addition, or if we can't acquire property, improving our.
Okay. Now, say option A, where some loose land is acquired, right? Is that parking lot suffice for a larger baseball or softball tournament? Because I still feel like there's going to be cars to final score that aren't going to fit into that parking lot.
Yeah, there've been two thoughts on that, conversations essentially. One, there's about 80 stalls on 2nd Street, painted on both sides of the road. So that would have to,
Bike lanes, though.
I know, but we've counted it. So there's about 80 stalls that are there. Additionally, we've talked if the school district and things for tournaments would be agreeable, and I can't speak for them, but we certainly would ask them about could we use their lot and do busing for large tournaments, or tell people they could walk the green circle, which is promotion of our trail to get into the complex. So that athletes won't want to do that. You can't lug, a bat and ball bag all the way through the trail, but certainly that would be the two ways we'd go about it. Parking is a big challenge, but in truth and reality, a park system that's as developed as ours, it's rare to get just flat open sites where you can build from scratch. And if you start adding in, say, bathroom facilities, and you start getting into stormwater retention and the things you need to grade facilities of this size, you can talk about multiples of millions of dollars to start from scratch. So we would likely try to work with the partnering agencies to say, hey, if we have this big tournament going on, can we use your parking lots if it doesn't conflict with their uses? But I'm not going to cut it, right? You have 4 fields running, right? It's certainly going to fill up the parking areas.
So you mentioned busing, maybe park at Spanish or something and bus them to Zenoff. Whose bus, who pays for the bus, who's driving the bus? Where does that all,
So in,
where is that in the plan?
yeah, great question. In conceptual stage planning, we aren't into that level, right? If we were going to build the field, we'd have to address it. And ultimately, if the tournament's not held, right, when they're doing the tournament planning, it either fit or it doesn't. So I can tell you, today we've not laid down the schematics. We've just talked about the pure numbers and what it would mean.
Because I've been to tournaments in Woyak, and they got parking in however many fields they have, and they're still out of parking, and people are still parking on the roads. Okay, appreciate the advice.
Before we come back for a second round, anybody else have first questions? If not, we'll go back to Steve.
Is soccer still a big activity in the city, and are these fields used for soccer or tournaments or anything like that?
No soccer at this complex. My understanding is all the soccer takes place out on the east side of the city behind the complex. With that said, though, the high school soccer team, I think I can talk about this, right, is going to rent Gerke. They are using this field here for high school soccer practices and games. I just want to make sure that was okay. Any other questions?
Well, sorry. I was at the meeting for lacrosse a couple weeks ago at the Bliss Center, and I'm hoping as a dad of a lacrosse player that they continue to play lacrosse. I know it's not going to happen this season, but potentially next season. Isn't the soccer and lacrosse going to have a conflict?
So I can tell you how lacrosse works from my end. So the athletic department handles their priority scheduling with their own athletics. But when we did the project for the upgrade on the turf here, in our contract, the high school and the athletic director at that time thought that maybe someday eventually they could have a lacrosse team. So their current subscription agreement with the city, the school district pays to use our field here, includes lacrosse access when that day comes. Soccer, because it was housed out on the east side of the city, the contract stated it had to be net neutral for revenue, meaning if it cost the school $2,500 to play out there, to bring it here, they had to pay the city the same amount. So my understanding is if the school district moves forward with that, we would let them play here, and then it'll fall into the athletic director or the athletic department's hands of who goes first. Again, we're getting in the weeds, but in the spring, track and field is first, right? They're obviously out here on the track. Then they would have to fill the schedule in, or the athletic department from the school would have to move them and work that piece out. From our side as a facility owner, we just have it set that they can use it, it's their space, and then they can prioritize it. If I misspoke there at all, please let me know.
And the cost is no fee.
Correct, the fees are lumped into their current subscription agreement. So it's already part of the fees.
What lacrosse? Are we talking about Central Wisconsin Select in the fall or in the spring? Or are we talking about like Pacelli United?
The Stevens Point area public school system creates a lacrosse team. They have it included in their fee structure. Now, youth lacrosse, the club team, the youth program,
Central Wisconsin Select.
I would have to check the contract for the title. Jim Mendyke was the gentleman who signed the contract. They also pledged out here, so they also can play here, but they are a lower priority. So how we work priority scheduling is if Stevens Point area school district sends the reservation, then Pacelli sends it in. On odd years, one of them goes first, and even years, the other one goes first. In the spring of the year, then we trickle down. So then soccer, lacrosse, and it's listed in priority, and one can bump the other. And it sounds complicated because it is, but we spend a ton of time, I can tell you hours each week going through it. But I think I can speak for the groups. It works really well. That's why we have a lot of usage on these fields, because without it, it's chaos. You know, it's move this, move that. So they all have that. When they pledged 15 years, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars to this, they had to have that to satisfy their boards.
Fair enough. Thanks, Dan.
Any additional questions? If not, I will be up front here, obviously, till the next meeting. If you have individual questions, you're welcome to come on up. We did record this, so if somebody could not attend tonight that you'd like them to see it, it's going to be on the city website. It'll be part of the official record. You're happy to look through it. And I can't tell you enough, tell all of your organizations, please fill out the survey. That is the data. That doesn't mean that you cannot contact members as well. You're welcome to, right? But the official kind of written comment piece that we're requesting officially from the city is through the surveys, because that's going to help us give the data we need for those park commission members and ultimately the council eventually to make those final decisions. So with that, I appreciate your time. If you're hanging around for the 6 o'clock, we'll be going through a similar start, but we'll obviously be getting into more details of that. And again, otherwise, I appreciate it, and we'll see those of you that staying around till 6 o'clock. Thank you.